And so even though I like Sam and I think his video is great and I think you all should watch it, there are going to be points where I disagree. Here's a fascinating one. The Canaanite woman.
And his disciples came and begged him, saying, "Send her away, for she is crying out after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." And he answered, "It is not right to take the children's bread and to throw it to the dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desire." And her daughter was healed instantly. And so, I mean, there's been a lot of talk recently about how, Jesus is always sort of welcoming of the stranger or the foreigner or the ethnic other. And there are certainly instances where you can see that, but there's also this other side of Jesus. You might call this ethnocentric, Jewish focused, Jewish only side of Jesus. And one thing I will say from interacting with lots of Jews, and because some of my friends are Jews, you can still see this side of Judaism that is often very self focused and self prioritizing, and this somewhat suspicion of outsiders is certainly stronger in some Jewish people than others, some Jewish communities than others. But when I look at this, I can see that Jesus has that same thing going on. And you could even say that he refers to this Canaanite or this Syrophoenician woman with an ethnic slur. I mean, calling someone a dog, I don't think that was any more polite then than it is now. If anything, the opposite. But still, she doesn't take it as an insult. She sort of leans into it, right? This idea that, well, even the dogs get to eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. She's sort of recognizing this sort of Jewish centricness, this sort of closeness to God that the Jewish people have, and her outsider status to it, but still hoping for some of the crumbs that fall from the master's table. And I think that this is a passage that doesn't get talked about enough when we talk about Jesus's self-understanding and Jesus's interaction with ethnic outsiders.
It's important that she's a Canaanite woman because, of course, God calls Israel into the land of Canaan. He calls them to be a unique nation of people, unique from the pagan nations that were there. And yet here we have one of those very women. She's a Canaanite. But she comes to Jesus. She cries out. And I think this is really important. We miss this. The crowd often refers to Jesus as a Nazarene. But you hear from these other people, like the blind man Bartimaeus, hear this Canaanite woman. She calls him Lord. She calls him Son of David. She doesn't see Jesus as just a Nazarene. She doesn't see Jesus as just a Galilean. She doesn't see Jesus as just a Judean even. But as the Lord, as the Son of David. And that's part of my project, is to get people to see Jesus for who he really is. Expand the view there. But he did not answer her a word. His disciples came and implored him, saying, "Send her away, because she keeps shouting." But he answered and said, "I was sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Notice, he's not talking. He doesn't say, "Lost sheep of the house of Judah." Lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now, is this in reference to the United Kingdom? I think it probably is, but you will also miss something if you don't realize that Judah and Israel, as two kingdoms, were separated from each other. And she begs, she bows down before him, saying, "Lord, help me." And he says this, "It's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." Wow. Again, Jesus is going to challenge our view of who he is. Is he calling her a dog? Or is he describing the house of Israel? And how does God view the house of Israel? How does Jesus view the house of Israel? Well, there's a table, there's bread, there's children, and there are dogs. And do we throw the crumbs to the dogs? She said, "Yes, Lord, even the dogs feed on the crumbs which fall from their master's table." This Canaanite woman is willing to assume the role of a dog if it means that she can draw near to the master's table. That is the faith of this Canaanite woman. Jesus will later say, don't say that you have Abraham as your father, for out of the stones of the ground God can raise up children of Abraham. So who are the children seated at this table? I think this Canaanite woman actually shows us that she is one of the children seated at the table because of her humility. She's willing to even say, yes, I will, if it means I can be in the house, if it means I can come up to the table of my master, I will come up even as lowly as a dog, as a low, humble person. It's interesting. You can also look at this passage and look at the interplay between sheep and dogs. I don't know, there might be something there, maybe more to that. But I think the point of the passage here is not that Jesus is saying, oh, this table belongs to the Jews or to Judah. And we can't really take the crumbs off of this table and give it to people who are not of the house of Judah. That's not what this passage is saying at all. Judah is not mentioned. Israel is mentioned. And I do think it's the united Israel. I think it's God's view of Israel, not a human view of Israel, not an earthly view of Israel. And in that house, you approach the table with humility. And what does Jesus say? Your faith is great. Ah, who else had great faith? Who else has great faith? Doesn't Abraham have great faith? And isn't that the blessing that Abraham will give to the nations, even maybe this Canaanite woman? That Israel is a light to the Gentiles and is never meant to be insulary, but always missional, always global, a light to the Gentiles. God is saying, you will be my particular people, and I'm going to raise you up, to be a light. And so I think there's a bigger plan going on. And even this Canaanite woman has great faith. And I don't know, you could disagree with that interpretation. Is her faith great like Abraham's faith? Is that what Jesus is saying? Maybe. I think it's clear that she is sitting at the table. And so this is not a passage about how one tribe of people is greater than the other, but that the kingdom of heaven, the house of Israel, is a house where you get to eat of that table because of your faith and your humility. Something like that. Well, thank you for checking out this video. As many of you know, I kind of do this part-time, so your support for the channel is really appreciated. I will leave links in the description for videos, for playlists, for live streams that are coming up, and I will catch you in the next one.